The officers in our LEAP program and our Metro Police and law enforcement services perform a critical job of visible policing, crime prevention, and what we call stepping into the gap left by the struggling South African police service. But what do we mean by this? What exactly is the scale of this safety and security void, that gap, that has been created by the understaffing and under-resourcing of SAPS stations across our metro, and which is increasingly left Cape Townians at the mercy of gangsters, drug dealers, and extortionists? If you know me by now, you'll know that I'm a numbers and stats guy. I don't like to make claims and base my actions on perceptions and feelings. I prefer data. Over the last while, we've worked hard to assemble all of the numbers on SAPS deployment levels in our city, using parliamentary replies, public data, and police to population ratios. And I must tell you, colleagues, the results have come as a shock. These figures are deeply concerning. The data tells us that SAPS resources in Cape Town are in steep decline. Just listen to these numbers. Since 2021, the number of operational SAPS officers in the Cape Town metropolitan area has declined by approximately 1,300 officers, or 15%. That's 8,668 officers in 2021 to only 7,355 now in 2025, a reduction of more than 1,300 officers over the past 4 years. And that is not coming off a satisfactory base either. We all know that Cape Town's hardest hit crime areas have been under-resourced by SAPS for many years. The Khayelitsha Commission of Inquiry into Policing all the way back in 2012 confirmed this. Since then, Cape Town's population has expanded rapidly. We're currently the fastest growing metro in South Africa, as we know. But instead of expanding SAPS numbers to meet this growing population, to meet that shortfall and keep up with our growth, our city has lost more than 1,300 SAPS officers in just this term of office. Furthermore, there are more than 200 detective vacancies currently in the Cape Town metro area. 1,300 fewer officers than 4 years ago, and 200 vacant detective posts. Colleagues, these numbers are deeply concerning and actually outrageous. In fact, it's possible, I would go so far as to say that it's even likely, that this is now the lowest SAPS deployment in Cape Town ever. While SAPS should be greatly increasing its deployment in Cape Town, it is actually in retreat. So is it any wonder that SAPS is not able to turn the tide on crime, and why we in the city must constantly be called on to step into the gap? And what do we mean when we say we are stepping into this gap? Again, I prefer to illustrate with numbers. Over the same period, 2021 to 2025, our own enforcement capacity has grown by an additional 1,263 officers. For those of you who can remember our election pledges, we were elected in this term of office on a specific pledge to quote unquote add hundreds of more boots on the ground in Cape Town. And we have delivered that pledge emphatically with 1,263 new officers so far. But, Speaker and colleagues, it is a matter for serious concern that with all the effort we have made, all of the funding that we've invested in new officers, nearly the same number of SAPS officers has been removed from the streets over that same period of time. We've added 1,263 new officers in the city. SAPS has withdrawn 1,300 officers from their deployment. This means that for every officer we've added, SAPS has taken one away. And the sad fact is that the overall total number of law enforcement officers of all agencies, SAPS and city in Cape Town, has not grown at all. We should be seriously concerned by this. This is what we mean when we say we are stepping into the gap to provide a service that is not the constitutional mandate of this sphere of government, but which we cannot possibly ignore in the hopes that SAPS will one day recover by itself. It is unlikely to do so. Our duty is to Cape Townian families and communities, and that is why we've taken on this critical responsibility and directed billions of precious public rands here in this city towards safety and security interventions, and many more boots on the ground. And while the truly eye-opening stat here is the sharp decline of SAPS numbers against the increase in city law enforcement numbers, this is not only limited to human resources. We've also compiled some stats on available vehicles. Here is another shocking statistic. The city's fleet of Metro Police and law enforcement vehicles now outnumbers the SAPS fleet in Cape Town by over 360 vehicles. Here are the numbers. We have got 2,433 law enforcement and Metro Police vehicles, while SAPS only has 2,071, of which only 78% are operational right now, compared to well over 90% of City of Cape Town vehicles. Colleagues, what does this all mean? This means that we are edging closer and closer to a truly bizarre scenario. We are edging closer to the bizarre scenario in which South Africa's lead crime-fighting agency, the SAPS, actually has fewer resources than a subsidiary support agency like the City of Cape Town Metro Police and Law Enforcement. How is this possible? How have things got so bad in the SAPS over time? Suspended Police Minister Senzo Mtsunu's testimony before the Madlanga Commission amounted to an admission that SAPS has no workable plan to deal with the gangs on the Cape Flats. Not a week goes by without a terrible new example of innocent people killed by warring gang members. And very often they are young children who just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Like 12-year-old Faisal Chalice, who was shot and killed in Tafelsig 3 weeks ago while running ahead to collect party packets for his younger siblings. And just 2 days ago, a 14-year-old boy was left fighting for his life in Tygerberg Hospital after being caught in gang crossfire in Elsie's River while on his way to school. No parent should ever have to experience loss like this, and no neighborhood should ever have to live at the mercy of a relatively small group of violent young men at war with each other over drugs and territory. We watched the daily testimony at the Madlanga Commission with great interest and fascination, all of us glued to the TV. We watch how testimony after testimony at that commission details evidence of serious, inappropriate political interference in the management of SAPS and serious operational instability at SAPS. We see the work of the ad hoc committee in Parliament on the state of SAPS senior management. We see the work done by the acting minister to uncover the details of the complete and total collapse of SAPS crime intelligence, which simply does not exist as a meaningful crime-fighting organization anymore. We see how most of the SAPS national leadership is suspended or under investigation. Even just before this meeting, we see in the Daily Maverick today, if I just pull it up here, how the crisis in SAPS ballistic testing, with Brigadier Mishak Mkabela, the head of SAPS ballistic section at the Forensic Science Laboratory in Pretoria, saying that the ballistic section has a backlog of 41,846 criminal cases. Let me repeat that, a ballistics backlog of 41,846 criminal cases. This is why so many out and those guilty end up straight back on the streets. Of those, Mkabela said 21,732 of those cases are from 2025 alone, meaning half the backlog is just from this year. reflecting a deepening backlog that results in cases being thrown out of court for lack of evidence. And 5,000 of that backlog is just from the Western Cape, and you can bet that most of those are from Cape Town. This is why people keep getting let out back into the street. So, colleagues, we must ask ourselves, with all of this mounting evidence of crisis at SAPS, what is happening? Why is our country not more up in arms over the growing collapse at SAPS? SAPS is the new Eskom, the new PRASA, the new Transnet, all rolled into one. It's like every other institution in South Africa destroyed by ANC cadre deployment, corruption, and political capture. But it's even worse than those other entities, because the collapse of SAPS will have far more devastating, and is having far more devastating consequences than load shedding or broken trains, because this is people's lives at stake and the rule of law in our society itself. Now, we cannot fix everything in South Africa from Cape Town. We can't do that. But we can demand that these resource numbers must be fixed. They must be rectified. It is simply unthinkable and unacceptable in the context of violent crime that our communities are living in, that SAPS is withdrawing 1,300 officers from Cape Town. It is unthinkable and it's unacceptable, and it must be fixed. But I think we can all agree that we probably shouldn't hold our breath that it is going to be fixed. So we have to carry on getting on with what we can do here. You will know from various speeches in this council and from our current budget that we really have accelerated our intervention in safety and security. This past couple of months, we've reached important milestones with the graduation and then the deployment this last month of over 700 new officers in Cape Town, and the deployment of 40 new officers as part of our N2 highway safety unit. These city deployments will play a critical role in keeping Cape Town's crime-ravaged communities safer as SAPS numbers continue to collapse. Arresting criminals and removing firearms and drugs from the streets is just one half of the task. Then comes the second half. You've got to make sure that those people are convicted of their crimes, so that these criminals are put away in prison and don't simply return to the neighborhoods and continue their reign of terror. Our officers are increasingly successful and well empowered to do the first half, but they do not have the authority to do the second half, to conduct investigations, gather evidence, build solid winnable case dockets, and see them through all the way to successful convictions. Currently, only a police officer can do that. And those police officers are stretched to breaking point in Cape Town, as I said, with over 200 vacancies just for detectives. The result is that only a tiny fraction of the arrests and confiscations that our officers perform lead to prosecutions and convictions. Our city officers remove around 400 illegal firearms from the streets every year. And those 400 cases go to that ballistics backlog. And we find that within a matter of weeks, those perpetrators are back on the streets, because that backlog is not going down, it's going up. Most of those cases will not result in a conviction because of those ballistics or DNA tests. And without those tests, there's no evidence to convict them. So the lack of SAPS resources, the lack of testing resources, together with a broken criminal justice system, means that convictions in those cases are just 5%. That's right, 5%, colleagues. Of the 1,670 guns taken off the street by our brave men and women in blue over the last 4 years, just 5% have led to convictions, a shocking number. And throughout all of this, our officers have been available to help, trained, competent, and ready to assist police officers in their investigations. In fact, our training college here in the city, we've already introduced a new special training module to ensure that all of our officers have the necessary skills to take down statements, to build dockets, and to help in crime scene management, given that SAPS forensic crime scene investigators are often not immediately able and available to respond to crime scenes. What we need, what we are waiting for, is the new police minister to grant those powers, to grant those investigative powers, so we can help build those cases, make those arrests, and get those people off the streets. You will know that I've spoken about this often, and I've raised it directly now with 3 consecutive police ministers. We have also already drafted the necessary regulations. We've drafted them in black and white, and we've sent them along with a new letter outlining the urgency of the situation and the deteriorating SAPS resourcing in Cape Town. We've sent those through to the acting minister earlier this month. In that letter, I explained to the minister that he has the authority in terms of Section 64 of the SAPS Act to confer investigative powers on a municipal police service by the means of regulation. You will remember that the minister, 2 ministers ago, said that he didn't have the power to require a constitutional amendment. We tried to explain it does not require a constitutional amendment. Others have argued it requires a legislative amendment. We've pointed out and explained it doesn't require a legislative amendment. The minister can do this by regulation. It is fully compliant with the Constitution, and it is an efficient way to expand investigative capacity. In fact, it's so obvious that all you need is regulatory power because the minister has already used that power. Minister Kachalia's predecessor, the now suspended Minister Mchunu, used those very powers when he published similar regulations for public comment. So this is a solution with both precedent and practicality, and it offers the minister a way of immediately augmenting the investigative powers of his own officers. And we know from his recent meeting with Premier Windi that he is keen on this. He's keen for practical solutions that can enhance collaboration and ease the burden on SAPS. And that is exactly what our regulations set out to achieve. So he can do this. He can publish those regulations. They can be published for public comment, and they can be enacted in 30 days' time. And we can start getting criminals off the streets in greater numbers. Obviously, over the long term, we would still want more comprehensive devolution of powers through an amended SAPS Act. But until that, we are perfectly happy, keen, and actually eager to start working with SAPS in investigating more cases. My experience of Minister Kachalia so far is that he is a man who is willing to listen to solutions and who seems to have an open mind to the principle of devolution that we are discussing. So colleagues, recently we heard President Ramaphosa praise the city of Cape Town and urging ANC councillors and ANC governments around the country to study what we're doing right here so that they can replicate some of those successes in their own cities and towns. And of course, they are all welcome here. We welcome such collaboration. I'm happy to share our learnings and experiences with all other towns and cities in all parts of the country. We can speak about the importance of clean audits and clean governance. We can speak about the level of infrastructure investment it takes to build a successful city of hope. We can speak about our mega projects to improve sanitation and public transport and housing and so on. There are many success stories we can share with lessons that can be replicated and scaled up or down to meet the needs of towns everywhere. We are doing so much right in Cape Town. So it is a terrible injustice that the one area of delivery where we only play a supporting role should have such a devastating impact on the lives of our residents. And as these falling SAPS numbers show, they confirm that the ability to fight and investigate crime in SAPS is unfortunately and sadly heading in the wrong direction. They are not turning the tide on crime. The solution is right here in front of us, in front of everyone. We've invested in the recruitment, the training, the deployment of so many additional officers, precisely so that we can take on more of this burden for an overstretched SAPS. But they've got to be empowered not to just make arrests and confiscate guns, but put those gangsters away where they belong, behind bars. So we are calling on you now, Minister Kachalia, The ball is very much in your court. Let's work together. Let's do what works. Let's do what is practically right for the people of Cape Town and South Africa. Let's build a new successful model of cooperation. Give us those powers, and we eagerly await your response. Thank you very much.